The green flag comes out for the unrestricted animal, Austin Kendall, your pole sitter. And right now, almost looks like a glorified hot lap session. Really, Austin Kendall's just kind of whipping it through those turns.
Yeah, sure.
The hot lap session continues as he is just opening up a lead on the full. Well, Austin Kendall, though, no problems right now. That car is sticking to the track.
The Quarter Midget Racing is a form of racing that's for kids, where it's in cars that are basically miniature versions of sprint cars. It's kind of a gateway to where kids can get familiar with racing and grow up to get into bigger cars. I started late. I started when I was 11. Typically kids start when they're 5. My grandfather drove drag racing cars, and my dad drove dirt late models. I remember when I was little going to a lot of my dad's dirt late model races. He took me to a racing event that was going on in Columbus, Ohio. It was like an indoor track. He just kind of showed me that this was there, which I had no idea it existed. My dad basically said it was an option and let me choose, but honestly, if you tell any kid that, hey, do you want to drive these cars, and they would say yes, usually. Before this, I had been driving like a go-kart in my backyard, so being able to race on an actual track with other people sounded fun. He asked me if I wanted to do this, and I said yes. It's not that me and my dad had a bad relationship before racing, it was just kind of there. There were a lot of weekends where we'd drive down to the track and it would just be me and him, and we would talk, and we kind of bonded over the racing. Although at first, he did what a lot of dads do at the beginning, is where they're a little harsh on their kid because they expect them to be really, really good and like pour everything they have into this. But there's always that turning point where the dad realizes, oh, these are kids racing. Like, they're out there to have fun, and there's no money involved. Like, the only prizes you really get are trophies and medals. There was that transition that we went through, and eventually he could accept the fact that I wasn't going to win a lot at first. Also because I had the weight disadvantage because I was bigger than most other kids. My dad changed because he realized that you can't win every single race. You can try to, ideally you want to, but other people have the same mentality, so not everyone wins every time. My very first win, I ended up hitting an orange construction barrel after my victory lap, mainly because I was stupid and took my hand off the wheel to turn off the car. Before I started and when I was just starting out, I was very timid. And the fear mainly came from the fact that these cars are really small, and flipping over in them is not an enjoyable experience typically. Being in such a small object, flipping over just sounded terrifying, understandably. I was afraid of that very much because I had flipped the go-kart that I drove in my backyard, and now I was in a smaller vehicle that could also flip, possibly more aggressively. I was in a race and there was a wreck that happened in front of me, which usually I'm really good at avoiding. There was a car sideways, like pointing away from the wall, and I was coming out of the turn at full speed, and being at such a small track, I only had so much time to react. So my first reaction was to turn left to go underneath it, but I turned sharp enough to the point where the car went up on 2 wheels, and I turned right to correct it, and I overcorrected, went into the wall full speed. Ended up flipping the car up and over the other car and landing back on my wheels again on the other side of it, facing the opposite direction. So we ended up walking off the track, and I realized that wasn't that big of a deal, so I became less afraid and more aggressive on the track. Fear wasn't there.
And none if you do. If you have a rough handling car, you got to know how to do that too.
Yep, exactly.
track. You can see he also gets the wheel up off the track too. I mean, the way he's kind of setting out of the car and the way that they.
Off to a great start every time. Bud McCune just not able to hang with him. See whether or not he can do it this time.
Move on him coming down low. Now he's on the high side and he gets squeezed out. Checker flag goes to Austin Kendall.
I placed 5th in the nation the first year because there were only like 5 or 6 people in that engine class in the series that we had. Because at that point that engine class was pretty new. But then the next year they had more people in it, and this was after that wreck happened, and I was more assertive on the track, and I ended up getting 5th in the nation a second time. But this time out of like the fact that I was capable of doing it, not just the fact that there were only a few drivers to fill the slots. That was a high point of my racing career because it was, I don't remember if it was my very last season or the season before my very last season, but it was kind of a long way from where I started. During the time I was racing, my dad did become the rookie director for a while, and the rookie director can only really do so much when they haven't actually experienced Quarter Midget Racing firsthand, like on the track. So it was kind of a joint operation where he would teach the kids the basics and would go off and teach the parents how to work on them, while I would take the kids out on the track and like show them like what marks on the track to hit. I had made so many friends and stuff, and we were still hanging out for like one last season because we thought that when I was 16 that would be my last season, but then they bumped up the age a little bit to 17, and I had one last season to really go out there and go out on a positive note. It was kind of bittersweet. Like my very last race at my home track, I didn't actually win, but they still let me do a victory lap just because it was my last race there. And then I had another race at a different track, and I ended up winning that, and it was my very last race, period. So my very last race, I kind of went out with a bang.